Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go first. When I was 8 years old, my family and I moved to a small town in the Midwest, and it was a farm town. It was built in like the early 1800s. I think it was part of like the Homestead Act or something. It was, had a bunch of acres, a barn that had burnt down. Like it was an active farm back then. Lots of history. People definitely passed away on the property, that we knew for sure. And man, it wasn't like very obvious as a child. I was super intuitive and I didn't know what to do with that intuition, so I naturally got a Ouija board. And of course, I dragged along my best friend and my sister and a couple other times, a couple other friends on this Ouija board journey where we would go and sit at the top of the stairs to the basement and we would turn all the lights off and turn candles on and then ask this thing questions, and it responded. And I don't tell people this story, it sounds psycho. The fact that other people are there to verify all of these things and validate gives me inner peace, but I don't tell people. But it worked. And unlike what I thought would happen when it would move, even when we'd lift all of our hands off of it, it's still moving. It's how aggressively it moved. It wasn't gentle, it was like very sharp. And so much time would pass when we were in there talking to this entity as well. Like we would think 10 minutes went by and it would be 2 hours. Like insane. Being little kids, we wanted to know questions and answers like, who are we going to marry when we grow up? Or how many kids are we going to have? Or just questions like that. And every single time we start, it would give us answers at first, like, and it would tell us about itself. We would say like, what's your name? And it would just say demon, D-E-M-O-N, like over and over again. When we would ask questions about me, at first it would like give us answers, and then it would just spell bitch repeatedly, B-I-T-C-H, B-I-T-C-H, B-I-T-C-H. Horrifying, like any question about me. Also, sorry if I seem lackluster, I already told this whole story and it deleted. It was so freaky. We're also having like visuals of like hands reaching towards the planchette, like in the candlelight flicker. This entity gave us details saying that it was like buried in the cemetery, a cemetery that was like local, like the name was legit. It gave us like, I think it either gave us a plot number or it was just like the last name, and we did go there and what we found was crazy.
Okay, so the story I'm about to tell is why I will never touch a Ouija board. When I was in elementary school, I went to a friend's sleepover party for her birthday. It was me, her, a few of our mutual friends, and a few of her friends who I didn't know personally. The house that my friend lived in was kind of old, dark, a little bit far out from the city, but not completely isolated, but still kind of creepy. So this was back in the late 90s, early 2000s. So while we're having this sleepover, we're playing all of those games that we used to play back then. So we played Light as a Feather, we played Bloody Mary, and we just sat around telling ghost stories in the dark. All of that was fine. Nothing out of the ordinary happened while we were doing that. So after we get done with those games, I hear one of her friends talking to some of the other girls, and she's asking them like, oh, should I do it? Do you want to see it? Should we try it? And it turns out that she brought a Ouija board, and she was trying to see if anybody else wanted to try it out with her. So for context, while I was growing up, had some paranormal experiences, or at the very least experiences that I can't explain. And so for me, I prefer to just stay away from anything like that. I didn't like to engage. So the fact that all of my friends were trying to, mess around with the Ouija board was making me really uncomfortable. So they placed the Ouija board on the floor, and then everyone who was going to play sat down in a circle around the Ouija board. Everyone participated except for myself and one other girl. So since I wasn't participating, I sat down on an armchair that was right in front of where they were sitting on the floor. And then the other girl, who was also not participating, she sat on an armchair off to my left. And her armchair had its back to my friend's sliding glass door that led out to her deck. All of the lights were off in the room that we were playing in. Pretty much all the lights, in that entire floor were off. The only thing that was on was the TV, and the TV was on just in the background on mute, and everything else again was just pitch black dark. So the girls who were playing start asking it questions, like silly stuff, like, oh, who am I gonna marry? Am I gonna be rich? Stuff like that. So everything was going fine, and then all of a sudden, one of the girls slams her hand down on the board and says in this kind of, I don't know, strange voice. It was still her voice, but it just, the tone was a little off. She slams her hand down and she says, "You guys are doing it wrong. You're supposed to say hello first. Don't be rude." And so everyone looks at her like, wow, what a weirdo. But they went ahead and listened to her anyway. So they started over, they said hello, and then they started asking new questions. At this point, they're asking these questions. The planchette is moving. They start arguing over who's actually moving it and, whatever. While this is happening, all of a sudden, the hairs on my arms and the back of my neck start pricking. And I look up at where the TV is. Next to the TV, off to the right, was a hallway. The hallway was dark because, again, all the lights are off. The hallway is dark, but the entrance to the hallway is right next to the TV. And so what I see there is a silhouette, a pitch black, dark silhouette of what appears to be a person. And I was so freaked out, but I couldn't look away. I was staring at it, and I thought maybe that's just her dad. And so I'm looking for any sign that this figure that I'm looking at is her dad. But the problem is that her dad had kind of long, scraggly hair that was like, it would show off over here. So he also had a fairly thick beard. So if that was her dad, I still would have been able to see from the shadow silhouette his hair and his beard. This figure had nothing. It was an outline and nothing else. I also couldn't feel, I don't know if any of you have experienced this. If you have, please let me know, because this is the strangest thing I've ever seen. I didn't get that feeling of recognition that you get when you're looking at another human. Even if you don't know the person, you at least intuitively know that you're looking at a human being. I did not get that from this figure that I was looking at. So while I'm staring at this thing, and I don't even know how long I was staring at it, the same girl who slammed her hand down, all of a sudden, projectile vomits all over the board. And obviously, as soon as she does it, everyone who is sitting around the board screams and scatters away from the board. Everyone's staring at her, including me. That broke my concentration. So I'm staring at her, and she kept her head down, looking at the board after she vomited. And she says in this, like, almost whisper tone, oh, it freaks me out. I said, "Don't be rude." So at that point, I hear the bedroom door to where my friend's dad was sleeping open. I hear him walking down the hall, and I see him coming from where the figure was standing. And when I watched him do that, I knew for a fact that was not her dad that I saw standing there. And I know that because, again, like I said earlier, you would be able to see his hair, you'd be able to see his beard as part of his shadow. So needless to say, I did not sleep a wink that night. I don't think anyone else did either. I never went back to her house, and I 100% will never touch a Ouija board.
Once a couple of years ago, I was hanging out at home and I get an emergency call from my mom's phone. To make an emergency call, first of all, on an iPhone, what you have to do is hold down the volume button and the power button for several seconds and then run a slider on your screen. So it has to be an intentional thing that you do this. The recipient will then get the call and a map that shows exactly where your person made the call from. I see that she's near the old church that we used to go to when I was a kid. At this church is also my maternal grandparents' gravesite, and she's the one who maintains that. So it's not an unusual place for her to be, but it is unusual that she is making an emergency call to my phone. So my first thought is, oh my God, my mom's in trouble. I have to call 911. But logically, I know there's a couple of steps before that. So I call her, first of all, to find out what in the hell is going on. No answer. I text her, don't hear back for a few seconds. So I call my dad. Turns out he got the call as well. So I am about to call 911. Like my finger's on the trigger ready to go when my mom texts me back. Like, Mama, I just got an emergency call from your phone. I can see where you are right now. I can see that you're in some sort of vehicle driving away from, my grandparents' gravesite. Why were you testing the feature? What were you doing? And she said, that's weird. I didn't make any phone calls. I got to the gravesite with the flowers, set my purse down on the grave, like right at the foot of the grave, did my thing and walked back to the car. So let's revisit how you make an emergency call, right? Like it's 2 steps. You have to mean to do it. And somehow, while her phone was in her purse at the foot of this grave, it made the call to both me and my dad. So basically, my grandparents were just really sick and tired of not being able to call us, so they did.
I have been umming and ahhing about whether or not I want to do this video for 2 reasons. One, the Audacity Stitch trend has been all over my For You page this weekend, but I'm like a month late to it being cool to talk about, and that gives me the ick. But also, I don't make content on this channel anymore, so I don't know if anyone's here or if anyone cares, but then I just sort of figured this story is so crazy that actually it's quite nice to put it in a video so that I don't forget any details, because it wasn't that long ago. And I've told my friends and I've told some family, and everyone's like, that is nuts. So I was like, well, if anyone does care about it, then we can have a conversation about it and I can share a couple more stories. But to give context, I have always felt like the heebie-jeebies, do you know what I mean? Like a sixth sense, spidey sense. Something's going on. Like, I would never go upstairs on my own. I would always have to be escorted because I'd feel like there's somebody watching me in the hallway, little things like that, like going on holiday feeling like I'm not alone, loads of little things. But it really got validated like 2 years ago, where my grandma on my mum's side passed away, and it was kind of sudden. She lived like 3 hours away, so we didn't get the chance to go up there. We were told there was more time, and it kind of happened quite quickly, and we were like, so anyway, probably like 2 or 3 weeks after she had passed, my mum had gone up to the house and seen my uncle, and they had cleared things in the house. I didn't go. Actually, none of us did. It was just my mum. But I had this super vivid dream, like, you know, the type where you feel like it's real. It was wild. And basically in this dream, it's me, my brother, and my grandma, who we call May. So it's me, James, and May. And we're in May's house. In my head, it's her house. In actuality, it's like not her house at all. It just, in my head it was. And she's walking around clear as day, and she's talking to me and James are clearing things out of her house in my dream. And she's going, yeah, you know, like, now that I'm past, now that I've gone, there's some things I want you to have, and blah blah. And I was like, me and James were going, May, like, stop being silly, don't talk like that, like dismissing it. And she's going, no, we need to like face the fact. And she was really aware, talking to me and James, she was really aware that she was no longer part of this world, right? She then goes, come with me, I've got some things I want to show you. And we're like, okay. So we walk upstairs, and on the bed is our cat, and our cat had passed away like 2 years before my grandma had. And I was like, Dango! The big fat ginger Fluff was on the bed, and I was like, no way, Dango, oh my god. And I went over and I was snuggling with him, and I was like, May, this is so cute. And behind me, May and James are talking, and she's going, yeah, there's a few things that I really want to show you. And James, all of a sudden, James behind me is going, oh my god. And I was like, what? And he's like, look what May's just given me. And he turns around a box, and there's like an old men's watch. And I was like, that's cool, where's that come from? And May was like, it's your granddad's, you should have it, it's yours. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know. And then she goes, Victoria, there's something I really need you to have. And she's going, you know, there's jewelry, there's so much, but like, there's this one thing that I really want you to have. She roots around in the wardrobe and she pulls that out, and she is emphatic about it, like she is buzzing, and she's like, you need to have this. And I look down, and it's a matchbox, and I was like, that is so weird. James goes, what is that? And I was like, I don't know. And May's going, it's a matchbox, it's like so old, your granddad gave this, you have to have it. She was so adamant that I had to have this little matchbox, and I was like, okay. And then I woke up, and I was like, that was crazy vivid, like so much detail, so much communication, so much like awareness that she was no longer here. I have to tell someone. So I went onto my group chat with my mum and my brother, and I was like, guys, this is gonna sound real freaky, and hear me out, but I've just had a crazy dream. Recounted the dream to them, and my mum was like, I don't know, like, your uncle has the watch, like, that's nothing new, and I don't know anything about this matchbox. And I was like, yeah, I figured that's the case, but just in case you see anything, let me know. but it's probably nothing like this has ever happened before, FYI. Like, I've never hallucinated or had nothing like that, so this was like so random. Anyway, 2 days later, me and my mum go to a cafe, and we sat down, we're chatting away, having a coffee, and she goes, "That dream that you had?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "Tell me about it." So I explained the story, and she was like, "Can you describe what you saw?" And I was like, "Well, you know," she was talking about like jewelry, but also she got this matchbox out and she was so excited about it. And I was like, "It was little it's from little it was little, it was super old, like you could tell that it used to be white, but now it's kind of like tea stained, had like red markings on it, but I didn't see anything inside. She just wanted me to have it." And she was like, "You know how I went to May's house like 2 weeks ago to go and clear things out with your uncle?" And I was like, "Yeah." She was like, "I found a matchbox." And I was like, "What?" I was like, "Am I gifted? What's going on?" And I was like, "No way." And she was like, "Yeah, but it just had like pearls in it." And I was like, "What?" And she was like, "Yeah, like looks like a necklace, like pearls or bracelets or something had been broken and they were all kept in this matchbox." And I was like, "Fuck off." It's like, she told me about jewelry and she wanted me to have this. That's jewelry in that matchbox. I was like, I was like, "Please tell me you've got it." And she was like, "No, I threw it in like a bag that's going to the charity shop. I just thought it was like trash." And I was like, "Do you know what? It happens. Maybe there was something there, who knows." Anyway, my mum was obviously thinking about this the whole way home, and she calls my uncle and she goes, "Phil, have you got those bags of the charity like stuff?" And he was like, "Well, I gave it to charity like yesterday morning." And she told him the story and he was like, "Okay, well, that's kind of weird. Here's the number to the charity shop, so call him." And she calls this guy, and there's probably like I don't know how many bin bags, but there's a lot of bin bags of stuff in there, like clothes, items, ornaments, all sorts of stuff that you just don't have any use for. We kept the sentimental bits, you know what I mean? And she calls this guy who she's never spoken to, and she goes, "I'm going to sound mental, but my brother came in here 2 days ago with a load of bags, and there's one thing," and she told him the story. And he was like, "Oh yeah, I know that matchbox. It's got like pearls in it. Yeah, I thought it was rubbish, but I just kept it to like one side for some reason." And she was like, "No way." It's like, why would you keep that to one side? There's just a like grotty old matchbox with like broken part. Like, why would you? I don't get it. Anyway, so she then, next time she goes up to where my cousin, my uncle lives and where my grandma lived, she goes to this charity shop and he keeps them for her, and she gives them, and she shows me this matchbox, and I was like, "Get in the bin. That is the exact thing that I explained." I couldn't believe it. It was freaking me out. And then she was like, and also she was like, "Behind closed doors, because I didn't want to like freak you out, I've been looking through photo albums to try and figure out what the pearls are." And she was like, "They're not real. But when I got to the wedding photos of my granddad and my grandma, she's wearing a pearl necklace with those pearls." And so, to make sure that you've got the receipts, because I know some of you are going to call shit, and that's fair enough, because I would, but I swear on my dog's life, she brings me this matchbox, and I put it in this little, I got this like ornament made. Look, the tea stained with the red, it's old, and there's a couple of the leftover pearls because we got them made back into the necklace that was on her neck for the wedding. So these are like the pearls that were in the matchbox, and there she is. This is what my grandma handed to me in my dream. Just to round this up, because I realised I didn't say it, the like logistical brain that my other half and my dad have been doing is like, "You obviously have seen it." I have never been through her wardrobes. I never went through her stuff. I never went through cupboards. Like, I just had never done it. I probably stayed in her room 3 times when we stayed over, and I was literally in the room, in bed, in toilet, leave. That's it. So I have never been through her house. I have no recollection of any matchbox or watch or anything, of like nothing, absolutely nothing. So the whole thing's crazy. I am, you know, gifted queen. Anyway, this is like an 8-minute TikTok, so that's enough now. Anyway, okay, bye.